off with a video. This is from the Kansas City Fire Department. I don't know what year it was, but they were in the process of going to defensive operation for on a 3-story building, as you can see that. And they had a guy, they were using a 1979 model, so they had a backup apparatus on track. They didn't have their first line apparatus on track, so they were using an older piece of equipment. And you're going to see what happens. And then we'll talk about it after we watch this video. The video is about 7 minutes long.
Kansas City, Missouri. An abandoned apartment building has exploded into a raging inferno. Desperate to fight the blaze, firefighters extend their 100-foot-long aerial ladders to their limits. But under the stress from the intense heat, the unthinkable happens. One ladder buckles, sending a terrified firefighter crashing into the conflagration below. Firefighter Mark Ashley is climbing to the end of one of the aerial ladders, which is being extended to its full 100-foot length.
You're always a little nervous climbing up there because you don't know what's in store for you when you get up to the top.
This time, what's in store for Mark will forever shake his sense of security as a fireman. For just as the ladder reaches its limit, it suddenly buckles in the middle, plunging Mark toward the pavement 70 feet below.
Everything went into slow motion. I was thinking of my small children that I had at home, whether I was going to be able to see them the next morning.
But he doesn't hit the ground. Instead, Mark is jolted back to reality when the ladder crashes into the ledge of the rooftop and stays there. Fortunately, he remembered to hook his safety strap to the ladder before the plunge.
If I hadn't been strapped into that aerial ladder, I would have probably flown off as soon as it struck the building.
The roof may have broken his fall, but now Mark is facing another problem, for even the slightest movement is causing the ladder to shift precariously on the crumbling ledge.
The ladder was unstable, so I really couldn't move.
Mark is also being burned by the scalding heat rising from below.
The fire was too intense, too hot. I thought, this is it. I thought I was going to die.
Down on the ground, the screams of onlookers draw firefighter Rick Carper's attention. As he watches Mark fall, he prays for a miracle.
Surprised how much praying you can do from the time that thing will fall until when it stops.
Rick's prayers are answered when the ladder's operator is able to catch the edge of the building.
The driver was able to tweak it just enough so Mark would catch part of the balcony on the 3rd floor, and that's where it stopped.
With his friend now stranded above the fire, Rick's sense of duty takes over.
My first thought was I have to get to him before that ladder falls.
Rick dashes off to find a way to save him. Fireman Robert Bates is hard at work near the fire trucks when he hears the ladder collapsing.
Just out of nowhere, I heard the sound of twisting metal. And I looked up and I watched this ladder it folded.
He knows Mark is now trapped in a deadly predicament.
He was just strapped to this ladder and just being burnt to death, with nowhere to go and no way to get off.
Robert is desperate to help his fallen comrade.
You don't even think about your own self. You think about how we're gonna get to him, how we're gonna save him.
Then he spots Rick rushing past with a portable ladder.
I noticed Rick running by me with this large ladder. Then reality kicked in, and then everything was just at full speed.
But up on the 3rd floor, Mark has no idea that help is on the way.
There was a lot of smoke and I couldn't see anybody. I didn't know if they knew I was okay or if I was hanging there. I couldn't tell if they could even see me.
Mark is being overwhelmed by smoke.
My biggest fear was smoke inhalation. I thought I was going to pass out.
With every cough shifting the ladder even closer to the edge, all Mark can do is hope that somebody gets to him fast.
While you're up there, minutes feel like hours while you're waiting.
40 feet below, Rick and Robert are racing to set up the rescue ladder.
It just took a matter of seconds before we was able to get around to get a ladder to him. But from start to finish, it seems like an eternity.
Climbing the ladder just behind Rick, Robert is worried about the condition of the roof.
Not only did this ladder collapse on him, he's on a burning roof that's ready to collapse.
As Mark waits desperately, hoping for help, Rick and Robert discover that the roof is more damaged than they expected. Rick doesn't think the roof can hold both of them, and he yells at Robert to climb down.
He screamed at me to get off the roof because it was ready to go. And I mean, he screamed like, "Get your tail off this roof now."
But Robert stands his ground and remains behind Rick. They both crawl through the smoke toward Mark. Just a few feet away, Mark is about to give up hope when he suddenly hears a welcome sound.
I didn't know who was rescuing me. I just heard a voice from the smoke.
Then Mark sees his friend appear.
I remember when Rick stuck his hand through the smoke and he said, "Grab my hand, I'm gonna get you off of here."
Rick pulls Mark to the rooftop, but they're not safe yet. They still have to get to the rescue ladder.
As we crawled across there, elbows, knees, we were breaking through this roof.
And I was kind of afraid for us, thinking we're gonna fall down through here and burn to death.
Incredibly, they make it to the ladder. And at last, all three men begin their climb down to safety. Robert leads the way. Rick goes second.
All right. Looking at that video we just watched, what's a couple things that probably saved that guy's life that you saw from that video? What do you think? Having the ladder strap on. What else? Even if he had the ladder strap on, what else would have kept him from falling all the way to the ground? What's that?
Positioning, like hitting the roof itself, maybe?
Did you hear him talk about the operator? Quick thinking to swing that ladder, what he could do to swing it into the roof line and at least catch a little bit of that roof line, or he's going to ride that thing all the way down. So all in all, they did what they had to do. He was safety precautions. He had his ladder belt on. The apparatus operator, the aerial that was operating the aerial, was paying attention, swung it over, so it prevented him from getting killed or injured. Couple things they probably looked at. You're using an older apparatus. After the incident was over, they were probably saying, were you exceeding the limitations of it? So there's a couple things they probably looked at. Were they using it like it should have been? Was that guy, the sergeant that was on there, was he used to that apparatus? Maybe he came in that morning, never been on that apparatus before, and didn't know the capabilities of it. So it's a couple things that you had probably they had to think about on that. And this kind of, with that, we're talking about the safety belts, we're kind of leading into Chapter 19, Operating Aerial Apparatus. Like I said, I'm going to hit on some of these slides, not all of them. You can find them on the H drive, the PowerPoint, go through them if you want to. Even the ones I don't cover, just remember, it could be fair game on the test. Whatever's in that book could be fair game. This is what we're just talking about, him having his fall protection on, either if you're on an aerial device or if you're in Tire 2, the platform. You're going to be tethered in. Whenever that thing's movement or you're in movement, or if you're climbing a ladder, you're going to have some type of fall protection on. Talks about ladder belts. What's it mean here by maintaining 3 points of contact with structural features at all times? What's it mean by that?
2 hands, 1 feet, 1 foot, or 2 feet, 1 hand.
Yep. Is that always possible? No, because you're going to be sometimes working off the side of a ladder. You could be doing a rescue where you're carrying somebody down. What's another thing to have? Always have your safety, maybe a safety belt on or something like that in case you got to clip in. Especially if you're working off the side doing ventilation, doing horizontal ventilation or something. Have that ladder belt on where you can clip in. All right, we're talking about operating the device. Some of y'all working on certification, some of y'all been certified. What was it like the first time actually operating an aerial device or a squirt or anything like that. Was it smooth? Probably wasn't, was it? Jerky, thing was bouncing, and what happens when you do that? When you're moving at quick movements and it's jerking and bouncing back and forth, what's it doing to the ladder? Putting a lot of stress on the ladder. Also, if you had a person on that ladder, you know, you don't want to have a person on a ladder and be moving it, and the next thing you know, if you had a rescue and toss them off. So the biggest thing is probably getting used to working with that apparatus. And the only time you can read about it in the book and all that, until you get hands-on training and actually practice on it, that's the only way you're going to get better at working with it, working with the device. Know which way, if you move this lever, it turns right. If you move this lever, it turns left. You move this one, it moves it up and down. So come on in. There's a sign-in sheet right in here. It's somewhere around there. Just use your employee ID number. All right, so that's the things you got to worry about when you're with moving the device. Make sure you keep from too many jerky, sudden, quick motions. You got to. I call it having light hands, moving it with, making it smooth and everything as you move it. And that goes with a squirt. That goes with an aerial ladder. That goes with a tire. Talks about never extend or retract the aerial device with people on the ladder. Well, that's not always possible. You are going to have some incidents where you got to move an aerial. If you got a rescue, you got to move it, either raise it, lower it, or extend it, retract it. But as the aerial operator, you need to pay attention to who's on the end of that. Make sure their feet, hands, and all are clear. They're not between the rungs, so you end up crushing their leg or crushing their hand or something like that. So you always got to keep your eyes open for that, because like I said, it's not always possible to not, if there's somebody on there you got to rescue, you may have to move it. You may have to extend it. Talks about platform here, just railings and stuff. I don't know how many of you all have had the opportunity to be around Tower 2. Has anybody assigned to Tower 2, Engine 5 around here? All right, has anybody had the opportunity to actually work with Tower 2, anything like that? All right, you get the opportunity, you get detailed there or something, take advantage of it. See if they'll bring it out, especially with the weather getting warmer, and raise it. Let them see if they'll let you play with it a little bit, see. So it just gives you a different feel for something, a different piece of apparatus that you see. This is talking about apparatus with cables. We don't have any of this anymore. All our stuff is hydraulic, but this is what some of the older apparatus that we used to have, you had to worry about that. There's still, even with the newer apparatus, you got to worry about any type of pinch hazards, stuff like that, that could crush you or anything. So still be thinking about with the moving parts on it, but this is something we don't have anymore. Just talks about operating, making yourself familiar with the controls. And like I said, it should become second nature, where you know if you move this lever, which way it's going to go, which is it going to extend or retract it. That's just more hands-on time, getting familiar with the apparatus. Communication, you talk about, and that's going to be a big thing, especially when you're operating an aerial device or something like that, especially on a scene with all the background noise, with apparatus going, hose lines, people yelling, screaming, radio traffic. You're going to have different forms of communication so you can communicate with that person. And it talks about here, you can do verbal, which is what? Face-to-face. What else you got? What's truck 1? Yeah, your transceivers. What else? Truck 1, truck 3, all the other quints and stuff. What do they got? At the pedestal, intercom systems, hand signals. So whichever form of communication works the best on that incident, that's what you're going to use. Again, if you're working at the top of an aerial device, or and you need to tell the operator to move it, just make sure that they're looking at the same vantage point as you, if you need to move it left or move it right. All right, talking this kind of similar to the tire. You got a primary control station where the person's at the pedestal there, and then you got the secondary control station, which you got the controls up here. So they can either operate it from here or from here. This is the primary control station that can override anything they're doing up there. So this person's always paying attention to what's going on. So just in case that he sees something or she sees something unsafe, they can go ahead and override their controls. Anybody remember the ice bucket challenge in Campbellsville? Kind of similar apparatus. They did the bucket challenge with a bunch of college students. They set up the aerial, had a fog pattern to spray over them. They got done with the challenge, whatever. But for some reason, they were positioned under a power line. I don't know. I really don't know. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But it seems like they could have found a better location. But for some reason, I guess they were getting ready to bed the apparatus. These guys were still, there's two guys still up in the basket, and for some reason they raised the basket up. So as they were raising the basket up, they forgot about the power lines above them. And so one guy was standing up, he hit the power lines, went down. The other guy bent down to see what was wrong with him. He raised up to signal for help. He hit the power lines, so he's down too. And then all of a sudden you got this energized. These two down here, I believe, they suffered some electrical burns. So it makes me think, what was this person doing at the pedestal? Was he paying attention to what was going on up there so he could have possibly overrode what they were doing? So that's why this person's always got to be keeping an eye out for what's going on up here in case he sees something or she sees something unsafe, that they can shut down their operation. All right, just talks about here operating at the tip controls. For what reason should we put somebody at the tip of an aerial device other than a platform? But is there any reason to put anybody at the tip of Quint or Truck 1, Truck 3, any of those, Truck 4, Truck 8 ladders to operate like master streams or anything like that? Possibly. If you got something, if there's a problem with the nozzle and you had to manually adjust it, or if you had to change a tip or something like that, it's probably the only reason that you'd put somebody at the tip when there's water flowing. Because you're really putting with the water flowing, you're putting the weight on the end of that, so you're putting a lot of stress on the ladder. There's really no reason for somebody to be up there to try to direct where the water flow should go. You should be able to spot that from the ground. All right, we'll talk a little about telescopic aerial devices. When we talk about the water towers, what are we talking about here? What does Louisville have? Yep, where we got Telesquirt or Squirt 9 there. So we got that. So that's basically about the only thing we got left. We used to have Telesquirt 23 and Telesquirt 21. Well, they replaced them with the engines. We still got a backup Telesquirt, which is, I think, Telesquirt 20 now, that they keep. Y'all keep that out of 20s, right? Telesquirt 20. So we got really two Telesquirts. Well, they're getting ready, from what I've heard in recent classes here, Squirt 17 and both, I think Telesquirt 9 is getting ready to be replaced. Telesquirt 9 is getting replaced with articulating boom, I'm thinking. Does anybody know that for sure or heard that? So, well, they're replacing it, supposedly they're replacing, first they're going to do Telesquirt 9 since it's an older apparatus, replace that, and they're going to have like an articulating boom like Squirt 17. But I think there's no longer a Squirt because the company went out of business, so I think it's called like Hydroforce or something like that, but it's going to be an articulating boom from what I'm hearing. So you'll have an articulating boom at Squirt 17 and also Telesquirt 9, which it'll be a different name then, I guess. I don't know what they'll call it then. Your elevating platforms, that's going to be Tower 2. All right, looking at this picture, working with an aerial device, what is the most stable position to operate your aerial device off of? Side, front, back, rear? What's the most stable position when you're operating your aerial device, when you're setting it up or putting it up? Towards the front is going to be probably your most stable position. The back's stable too, but probably the most stable position is going to be off your front. But what happens when you operate off the front? You lose your reach. So say if you had a rescue right here or something, and you're pulling in, you're driving, you're pulling in, you see a rescue there, and you're like, I'll just nose in, and I'll shoot my aerial off the front, and I'll be able to perform the rescue. Then all of a sudden you got somebody up here. You might not have enough reach now because you just took yourself. And what happens once you get your position, and y'all have seen this, most of y'all have probably seen it, once you position, probably from driving or being on the apparatus, once you roll up on the scene and position, is it always possible to change your position? Now, what do you got around you? Hoses, apparatus, battalion vehicles, all kinds of stuff's around you. So once you commit somewhere, that's probably where you're going to be staying. You're not going anywhere else. If you are, they're going to have to move hose, apparatus, and that's going to take time. So think about that while on your positioning. I think you'll kind of be going over, have y'all had a class on positioning yet? So then I think it's maybe next week or something like that. So positioning is going to be very important when you pull up on the scene. All right, just talks about, I'm not going to go over this too much. People that are working on certifications are already been certified. It talks about setting up the apparatus, getting it ready, and also once the incident's over, taking it down. You can read over that in the book, look through these slides again. That stuff you'll learn while you're getting certified. Here we're going to talk about articulating equipment. And like I just said, articulating equipment, the only thing we got is basically Squirt 17. And what we got here is you look at it here, you got a lower boom and upper boom. What's the difference when you're working with one of these compared to an aerial device? What do you see as the problem that you'd have to deal with?
There's no ladder going up there, so whoever's up there's up there.
Yeah, but you only got one area, you're only one point you're really watching with an aerial device, right? Only the tip of it, you're basically paying attention to this. You got two things. You got the end here, and then you got the knuckle here. So you got 2 points that you're looking at that you got to be paying attention. When I was certified on Squirt 17, to make it easier, basically this is your lower boom, that's your upper boom. When it was bedded, you would raise your upper boom just a little bit to clear all this. And then you would raise your lower boom up to the point where you needed it at. And then from there, you would raise your upper boom. So that way, you weren't trying to watch 2 points of it. You were only watching 1 point at a time. So, like I said, if you get an opportunity to get certified on a squirt or something like that, Squirt 17, that's probably how you're going to be trained with it. But the problem is you got to watch your knuckle and also the end of it. Then it talks about articulating device. Just again, same with aerial. You got to know which way you're moving it. If you're elevating, you're rotating, you're extending, you're lowering it, you need to know what that handle or the lever's doing. And this is kind of what you'd see with Squirt 17 and with Telescopic 9, stuff like that. You operate off the back of it. And by operating off the back of it, sometimes it cuts your vision down because standing on that tailboard trying to operate it, you can't really get a good view. That's why the squirts, telesquirts, most of the time, do they ride 3 or do they always mostly ride 4? You ever see them cut down a telesquirt or a squirt company? No, they don't. Maybe for a couple hours, but it's just like a truck. They're always going to put 4 on there because you have somebody to help you with the jacks and also be a spotter for you. So you're always going to have 4 personnel on there. This again with positioning, just watching where you're at, how you pull up on a scene. You pull up here and you pull up beside an aerial device and all of a sudden they got to put the aerial up and then you can't do anything. You're out of the game. So you always got to worry about where you're parking at and where you could be because you may not be able to put your apparatus up, especially if this was Squirt 17. They pulled up and then are pulled up right beside a truck, and then the truck had to put their aerial device up, then they're pretty much dead in the water because they're not going to be able to use their squirt. We don't have any of these, not really going to cover it. You can look at it in the book. All right, talking about elevated water delivery systems can be divided into 3 categories. You got aerial ladders with piped waterways and water towers. That's your squirts. That's all your truck companies. Truck 1, Truck 3, Truck 4, Truck 8, all your quints. That's what this is. And then you got elevating platforms, which is your tire 2. This here, aerial ladders with detachable waterways, we don't have that. I mean, does anybody know, have seen a detachable? You seen?
Does that mean where you like ran the hose up?
Yep. And we'll see a picture of that later on, but man, I can't even think. That's what I got certified on. I got certified, and I'm telling my age and years a little bit, that's how I got certified on auxiliary truck 4. We had the detachable waterway. When I came in, all of them were set up that way. We didn't have, I think the quints were pre-piped waterways. That's the only pre-piped waterways we had at the time. The rest of them were all detachable waterways when I came in. And we'll kind of go over that a little bit, but like I said, I'm not going to hit on that too much because we don't have any of that in Louisville's fleet anymore. Again, just like when you're opening a hand line or you're opening a hydrant, you're going to open your valves. Nozzles must be opened and closed in a slow and controlled manner to avoid the undue stress. All right, talking about remote controls, aerial ladders with piped waterways, water towers may be equipped with remote controls. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe truck 1 is the only one with the remote control. I think y'all do have a remote control on that, right? Okay. That's the only one that I've heard of, and I don't know why. Maybe it's the cost of it, or they just thought it wasn't necessary to have it. How often have y'all used that? So it makes, like I said, it makes. Did y'all use it over on that one fire, I guess, by the church or something one time? Somebody was saying something. They got up on the roof. Got up on the roof, and you had a better. Okay, so it does come in handy, and it does serve a purpose, but like I said, they may have looked at it like it's an unnecessary purchase. Might have came down to money. That's why none of the quints have them, or truck 3 has them. Just, they purchased, when they first purchased truck 1, they said, let's go ahead and get it and see, what it's like. But basically, you can take that box, walk away from the apparatus, and just direct it from there, right? Move the nozzle and all that? Okay. Is that the only thing, just moving the nozzle?
Yes.
Okay.
Moving nozzle, putting it back in the park,
Okay.
and that's it.
Okay. So it does come in handy on, you have used, like I said, it does, on a couple incidents, being able to use that and walk away from the apparatus and be able to spot where that, you need that stream at. Again, it talks about firefighting mode and rescue mode. What do we carry all our aerial devices in? Okay, rescue mode. That's what we carry them in. How often do we use rescue mode compared to elevated stream? You're probably using elevated stream 95% of the time. What's the thing you got to remember? My fault. What's the thing you got to remember when you had to go to elevated? Yeah. Remember to switch it. Because if you don't, and it ends up like this, they're going to remember it. A lot of people on the scene are going to remember it, and they're not going to let you forget it. So remember to switch that pin. Years ago, they were having a problem with that. When they go to elevated master streams, people were forgetting to pin it. So they kind of were starting to debate whether, hey, why don't we just carry it in the firefighting mode, and then if we do have a rescue, we can pin it. The debate went back and forth. We kept it in the rescue mode. But there has been talks, and I can see the pros and cons of doing both ways. Do we have any of these video cameras on the tip of our aerial devices? Why do you think we don't? Money, and also we'd probably tear it up, and it would, wouldn't be worth the price of repairing it all the time. So they didn't want the additional cost of it. So that's one thing they avoided putting on there. Here we are, we're talking about aerial ladders with detachable waterways. This looks like a pre-piped one to me. Present more of an operational challenge. If this is pre-piped, and unless there's a problem with the nozzle or something, I don't see a reason for this person to be up there. Fully geared firefighter at the tip, putting undue stress on it with water flowing, just to say, hey, I need somebody up there to spot where the stream's going. No reason for it. Unless there's a problem with the nozzle and that person has to adjust the nozzle manually. All right, we're talking about ladder pipes. Has anybody ever seen one of those, the detachable ladder pipe? That's what it is. Except we don't have a full picture of it. I wish there's probably one out in maybe the shed somewhere that I could have brought in. But what you're looking at right here, here's your tip, And these tips you could change out. There was 3 different size tips, and then you'd have like a handle that went back a little further. This thing was, it was quite heavy, and what you'd have to do is carry it up the aerial device, or it'd be hooked onto the side of the aerial device, and you'd have to hook it onto the end of the ladder, flake down your 3-inch hose. Either you had to roll it out, or it was in a basket beside it, and you'd have to put it on the center of the ladder, and then make sure it's fastened down, the hose is some way. Then you would take a rope, and each have an eyelet here, and then they'd have an eyelet on this handle, and you'd put a rope on each one of those, and then the person, once they got it to the height they needed it, there'd be a person at the bottom directing the stream by moving the rope. So thank God for technology, because like I said, if you noticed have you noticed some of the holes where you put traffic cones or something like that in the slope to the tire, in front of the tire? Have y'all noticed any of those? Especially when you're the recruits and you're cutting grass and you see you got to avoid those holes and everything. It's probably, some of those holes are from that. People were doing training and the nozzle got away from them, and the water bored right into that ground because they lost contact with the rope and it just went right into the ground. So these things definitely had a lot of power behind them and stuff, but like I said, the only thing you could really use was straight tips on them. And I can't remember the last one we had. It's probably the last one was old like truck 1 that we had long, and that's probably been 10 years or more that we last had one of these. All right, manual stream change is necessary. Like I said, we're going to roll through these a little about detachable ladder pipes. You can read about them in the book, go back over these slides. We don't carry any of this, just remember it's fair game on the test. We'll cover this right here. There used to be, when you did get certified with a detached ladder pipe, there was this thing called 75-80-80 rule. That's what they called it. Basically, it's 75-degree angle, 80% height of the ladder, and 80 psi at the tip to supply it. So that was a quick way to set up this detachable ladder pipe. All right, talk about elevated platforms. Tire 2, you got nozzles. You got 2 nozzles on tire 2. You got a fog. They carry a fog and a straight stream. Then they also, they can set up a portable standpipe, and they carry hose in the basket. You also got a water curtain on tire 2. What do you think that water curtain's there for? Yeah, radiant heat. In case you're too close or something like that, you can charge it, and that way it'll prevent damage or heat damage to the ladder or the structure or the boom of it. All right. Okay, talk a little bit about grades. What's probably the best, if you're on a grade, is it better to stay center with the apparatus or operate off the side of it? Should you stay in line with the apparatus, or can you operate off the side of it? Which one would be better if you're operating on a grade? Like a grade, if you're going straight. If you're going straight up on a grade. Yeah.
Upgrade.
Yeah, upgrade. If you're upgrade, what's better? Can you operate off the side, or would it be better to operate, if you can, center? Center. It's more stable, and one place you can find that, if you look, I don't know how many of y'all look through those C-grade manuals when you're getting certified. Everybody kind of look through them, see what some of the specifications are, because if there's anything that ever goes wrong, and I'm talking about if it's something you got the device up in a high winds, or if you're operating off a grade or extended a certain length, if something goes wrong, they're going to question you about it, but then they're going to look back through the manufacturer's recommendations, and they're going to see what the recommendations of the manufacturer is. If you exceed that, then it's going to be your fault because you didn't follow what the recommendations for the manufacturer were. So C-grade manual, when you want to find out probably on what grades you can operate an aerial, how high or whatever, that's probably the best thing to do is look at your C-grade manual. It'll tell you a lot of that, tell you how the height, the elevation you can use in like certain wind speeds and all that. like I said, you can read through the book on operating off of grades, load restrictions, stabilization. All right, we just talked about kind of wind a little bit. If you got 50, 60 mile an hour winds, are you going to fully extend an aerial device? You're probably not, because what's it going to do to it? It's going to cause a twisting motion. You're probably going to damage it. And then again, they're going to go back to the recommendations of the manufacturer, and then they're going to ask you why you were operating it at that height in this, the wind conditions you had. It goes for squirts. That goes for aerial devices. All right, we're talking about cold weather here. What's ice do to an aerial device? Yep, puts weight on it. So we've been lucky this winter. We hadn't had much below, freezing weather, but there's been times where these aerial devices were operated for 2 or 3 hours, master streams, and you see nothing but a sheet of ice covering the whole aerial device. And this is what it does. 1 cubic inch of ice is 0.03 pounds. So if you got a whole aerial device covered in that, or a squirt, how much extra weight and stress is that putting it on? Talks about in the book about shrugging. I think it's moving the ladder forward, retracting and extending to knock that ice off. I would say don't do that. If you're on an incident where you got that, I'm sure Major Downs is going to be there. It's a large incident where you're flowing for several hours and you got a lot of ice on your apparatus. Somebody from the shop's going to be there. So if you got that issue, let the captain know so they can contact the battalion chief to let the shop know so they can decide what they want to do on how to get that ladder down, how to get the ice off of it. Don't take an axe to it. Don't take a sledgehammer to it to beat the ice off. If they want to do that, and they have in the past, I've seen shop personnel, I think, shrug. I've heard about it where they've extended and retracted to knock some ice off. If they want to do that, that's fine. I wouldn't do it. Let them do it and let them be responsible for it if they want to do that. Because like I said, something like that, you're not in a hurry to get, once the incident's over, you just want to make sure you get the apparatus back in working order, without damaging it. We kind of talked about this, direct flame contact with an aerial device. If you're too close, for some reason you position too close, one way to recover is to what? Well, retract it. What else? If you can't retract it, what else can you do for a device? What? Raise it. What else? I mean, what else you got? You got engine companies on the scene, right? What's that? Put a line on it, put a master stream, take the deck gun, fog it, do something like that. If you're too close, if for some reason you position too close, get some type of stream on it. That way it's going to protect it from radiant heat. And the last thing you want to do is start melting lights, cracking windshields, melting gauges, stuff like that. You can do this with the engines too. If you're too close and you start feeling heat, lay a trash line or a booster line on it just to keep it cooled down. It's happened in the past where people have gotten too close, even on small fires, and they've had to use a booster line to cool the apparatus or something because it's too much heat coming towards it. One thing, you just don't want to damage it. It does talk about if you do get some impingement, flame impingement, heat and flame impingement on it, just like ground ladders, these aerial devices have a sensor on them, so it'll change colors if it is exposed to heat. What should you do when that happens? When you have something like that, when your aerial device is exposed to heat, do you just put it back on track and go with it? Yeah, let the shop know, because they may want to bring it in for testing. You'll have a class with Major Downs in a few weeks. He'll probably go over on how they test, or you can ask them how they test the aerial devices. And I know that every 5 years they do a non-destructive test. Usually an outside agency comes in and tests the ladders. And then yearly, the shop personnel do annual testing on the aerial devices when you do your PM maintenance. So just stuff like that you should look at. If there's any problems like that, take it off track, let the shop look at it. They may have to test it to make sure it's able to put it back on in service. I'm not going to go through all this. You can read about it in the book, just things to look at. How often do we test our aerial devices or check them? How often do we check them? Check them once a week, really get a turn. What do you do when you do that? Stend them, rotate them, what else? Lube them up, check for leaks, stuff like that. So you should know by doing that and being part of that apparatus, you should know if you hear any unusual noises, vibrations, anything like that, that's not, because you should know it's not normal operation. So you should know the more you're around it and the more you work with it, you should pick up on stuff like that. Just talks about steps and indicators of mechanical failure. You want to take it out of service. If you do have a problem, let the shop look at it. Auxiliary pumps. We've had discussion the last couple days, the last few classes on this. And I'm hearing different things. Like when I was certified on squirt, or the aerial truck 4, I heard using an auxiliary pump, you were doing 1 minute on, 5 minutes off, or 2 minutes on, or 5 minutes off. What do you all, I've heard truck 1 with newer truck 1s, with the newer truck, what do you all do on that? Two different things, right? Like with if you're raising or elevating it, or if you're lowering it.
You talking about emergency operations?
Yeah, emergency operations, auxiliary pump. Your apparatus shuts down, so you gotta use the pump.
I was certified on older than ladder truck 7.
Okay, and what the,
Terribly old, but
yeah, it was the one of the older ones.
2 minutes, like going out, but
Yeah.
it was 5 minutes coming back, coming back in.
Okay, is that on, or like what? How long should you rest it? How long should you be on?
And then you rest, you're supposed to go 2 minutes and rest like 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, see, and
They told me 30 seconds on, 2 minutes off, but they didn't specify.
because I've heard things are different. Somebody's telling me about truck 1 that was, what was it, 3 minutes on, 20 minutes off, depending on what you were doing. If you were bedding it or something and lowering it, then it was like 20 minutes on, or 3 minutes on, 20 minutes off.
It's different going up
Yeah.
than coming down. because
Most of the time, unless you got some type of issue going on, you shouldn't be raising, if there's a problem, you shouldn't be raising it with the auxiliary pump. You really shouldn't, unless there's some type of rescue or something you need to use it. But most of the time, you should be either just trying to get it down, lower it. And where could you find that at if you have to find out how long you should use the auxiliary pump and how long you should rest it? Where would you? Yeah, you should be able to find it in that manual. That should tell you the proper times that you should use it. So whenever, like I said, you refer back to that. Like I said, I'm getting different numbers from everything. I get different numbers from truck 8. I had different numbers. Truck 1 had different numbers. So I think you refer back to each individual manufacturer's recommendations in the manual. Just some of the things right here that require provide information. If something does happen, they're going to come probably question whoever's operating the device first. Look at the weather, look at the load, look at emergency factors. That's just things they're going to look at if there's an incident. Just like that video we watched, that's probably several things they looked at that night to see what caused it. Was it mechanical failure, or was it a human failure, or was it a combination of both? We'll talk about below grade operations. What's some of the things that aerial apparatus would use for below grade operations, you think?
like Stokes Bank.
Stokes basket, somebody car goes over an embankment or something like that. Yeah, it's easier. Had one where somebody fell into Bluegrass Creek. It wasn't any water, hardly any water in it, but somebody fell down in it, broke their leg, so they set up Stokes basket operations to get that person out. You can also use it below grade, special like Squirt 17. If you need to set up, you got a basement fire, you can set up the squirt, flow it into the basement. Same with these aerial devices now. These aerial devices you can operate directly off the side now. The older apparatus, you couldn't do that. You had to stay mostly in line whenever you were operating them. Nowadays, the way these things are set up, as long as you got stable ground, you can pretty much set these things up any which way you want. This just talks a little bit about below grade operations, stuff you can read about in the book. All right, I'll hit on a few of these, but most of these I'm not, like I said, you can look at them in the book and look back over these slides. All right, biggest thing I talk about is using spotters, not only to back, but also even on a scene. If you're pulling into an alley or something like that and it's pretty tight, use somebody to spot you going in. It prevents, you know, if you got a position around some cars, use somebody to spot you. It doesn't hurt. You got 3 other people on the apparatus. Somebody can spot you backing up and going forward if you need it, especially when you got so much traffic and everything on a scene. It prevents a lot of headaches. You have an accident on a scene, you got a structure fire going on, now you got 2 problems going on now. And then later on, you're going to have to write letters, you're going to have to get a police report, and you're going to be down here for driver's training. So spotters are a big thing. Always think about using spotters. Overhead obstructions, watch for those. What am I talking about? Overhead obstructions on scenes and stuff. Yeah, power lines and even trees, low-hanging trees. You gotta watch for that too, because it will cause damage. Or if you park under a tree, you might not be able to raise your aerial device or something. Like I said, these things you can read over. I'm not gonna go through each one of them. They're all there on the slides. They're all in the book. All right, any questions on this chapter 19? I know we kind of went through it pretty quick. Just remember the stuff I kind of skimmed over. It can be fair game on the test. So remember that stuff you should study. All right, we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and we'll hit chapter 20 about another 45 minutes and 40 minutes, and we'll be out of here.